Some of the news here, Joe. President Trump issued another call for the special counsel's investigation to end after the FBI terminated a senior agent, Peter Strzok, who was removed from the investigation into Russian interference in the election after an internal watchdog discovered that he traded negative text messages, you'll remember, about Trump. The president tweeted, "Agent Peter Strzok was just fired from the FBI. Finally, the list of bad players in the FBI and the DOJ gets longer and longer. Based on the fact that Strzok was in charge of the witch hunt, will it be dropped? It is a total hoax. No collusion, no obstruction. I just fight back," writes the president. He later tweeted that Strzok had a lead role in what the president called the crooked Hillary Clinton sham investigation, adding it was a total fraud on the American public and should be properly redone. So, Joe, there are questions raised, first by Peter Strzok's attorney about how this happened, why it happened, when it happened. Right. The firing of Peter Strzok is not what was originally recommended, but his attorney says was ordered by the deputy director of the FBI after pressure from President Trump for all these weeks and months on Peter Strzok.
Yeah, it's nonstop, Willie. And, you know, Nick Confessori, what I just can't deal with is the fact that these Republicans in Congress don't speak out more aggressively, because the President of the United States yesterday, again, called the investigation into Vladimir Putin's interference in American democracy a, quote, witch hunt, despite the fact we've had dozens, a couple of dozen of Russians indicted. Yet we had the press conference last week where the director of national intelligence said that this is a grave threat to American democracy. The red lights are blinking. You had Trump's FBI director that he appointed coming out saying the threat is there, the threat is real, the threat is not going away. And you even had Kirstjen Nielsen, who has not exactly shown herself to stand up to Donald Trump in times where she should, where she said the crosshairs of our American democracy itself is in the crosshairs because of what Vladimir Putin is doing. And here you have Donald Trump calling it a witch hunt and wanting to end the investigation into Putin's interference with American democracy.
Well, Joe, in fact, here are some important pieces here, right? There were three men who 2 years ago were at the start of this investigation into Russian interference. James Comey, the head of the FBI, as number two, who's Andrew McCabe, and now Peter Strzok. All three have been fired by the president or pushed out under pressure from the president. So three people who led and oversaw and permitted this investigation into Russian interference in our country, in our elections, are all now gone. And by the way, they also, as you know, were overseeing the investigation to Hillary Clinton. If you're going to pull back a little bit and think about the facts here, it's undoubted that the investigations of these two people, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, probably helped Donald Trump more in the beginning than they do now. And yet, here he is, you know, calling witch hunt and going after these people and inserting himself into a personnel decision. And it is, you know, something that gives you a bit of foreboding.
Meanwhile, at a federal court, Elise, in Washington yesterday, a fourth federal judge rejected a challenge to Robert Mueller's appointment as special counsel. The judge, Dabney Friedrich, was appointed to the bench by President Trump last year. The move to dismiss came from a Russian firm charged with conspiracy to defraud the U.S., arguing that an independent counsel violated the Constitution's appointments clause by creating an unaccountable branch of government. Judge Friedrich rejected that argument and wrote that Mueller had not strayed from his jurisdiction. So pressure on Robert Mueller from all sides, but a decision in his favor yesterday in Washington.
Well, something I found to be interesting is you look at how the Mueller investigation does send some action items up to New York, and they're quick to say, oh, Southern District can handle this, but they are keeping certain items in their jurisdiction and keeping things closer to D.C. So I do find that interesting, what is passed off as this is a local issue, and then, oh, this still has superseding issues of national interest.
What about the larger point, though, Elise, that people are not, Republicans in particular, not standing up for the premise of the investigation, the premise of the special counsel's work, which is not specifically, obviously, a witch hunt to go after Donald Trump, but a broad investigation into something everyone, including every intelligence agency under this president, knows to be true, that Russia interfered in the 2016 election and continues to do so today?
Well, I think you're seeing most of the theatrics on the House side. I mean, certainly there are senators, Republican senators, who could do more to stand up for this investigation, but they really are biding their time and looking to just get through midterms. And so to push this off as much as possible to see what effect Donald Trump is actually going to have when voters go to the polls in November.
Well, and you know, Heidi, again, we have to do this every time Donald Trump calls this investigation into Russian interference a witch hunt. Again, a witch hunt is something where you're wildly going around like Joe McCarthy and you're making accusations and, you know, you find next to nothing. I mean, in this case, you've had the president. Well, first of all, we've talked about the dozens of Russians that have already been busted for trying to interfere in American democracy. You've got the president's campaign manager that helped put him over to the top and helped him at the RNC in 2016. He was arrested. He's being tried right now. You've had National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who was arrested, pled guilty, and is cooperating. You had his assistant campaign manager, Rick Gates, who pled guilty, was arrested, pled guilty, and is cooperating with authorities. You have his campaign advisor, who he told the Washington Post was one of his two top campaign advisors, George Papadopoulos, arrested, pled guilty, is cooperating with authorities. This is no witch hunt. And how rich is it that yesterday Russians were arguing in federal court the same thing Donald Trump argues, and the same thing Donald Trump supporters argue, which is Robert Mueller's investigation must come to an end. He doesn't have constitutional authority to do what he's doing.
So, Joe, regardless of what happens with Peter Strzok and the sideshow of the attacks by this Congress and the House, particularly on these Department of Justice and FBI officials, the investigation goes on. You ticked off all of the numbers, and we're now getting close to getting answers about the fate of Paul Manafort. And let's remind people what the goal of a lot of this is. It is to squeeze these individuals for additional information about the president's own role in all of this, about his knowledge, for instance, about what happened at Trump Tower. And these are the people who are going to give us those answers. So you can just deduce from the president's own behavior of these increasingly frantic tweets, waking up first thing in the morning to try and again push this narrative of it being a witch hunt, about what his level of concern is that we are at this stage of the process, and what it means for himself potentially. So this investigation will go on regardless. But I do think that in terms of the significance of Peter Strzok, the concern there, I think, is that there is also an emboldening potentially on the Hill. You have on the one hand a silent majority who is not speaking out, and then on the other hand, folks like Devin Nunes who now want to take this as further ammunition to go after additional people. I saw a conservative website yesterday, Joe, say out with Strzok, in with Orr. In other words, Bruce Orr, who's yet another FBI official that they're going to put a target on his back.
Yeah, a lot of people yesterday on the Hill claiming a scalp in Peter Strzok yesterday, and the president tweeting that as well. Meanwhile, the attorney for FBI Special Agent Peter Strzok, as I mentioned, is suggesting his client's firing amounts to a purge of the Bureau. According to Strzok's lawyer, Eitan Goldman, the FBI's Office of Professional Responsibility ultimately decided that Strzok should face a demotion, a 60-day suspension, and a last chance probationary agreement. But the lawyer said FBI Deputy Director David Bowditch overruled that decision and ordered Strzok's termination. In a statement, Strzok's lawyer said the decision to fire Strzok is not only a departure from typical Bureau practice, but also contradicts Director Wray's testimony to Congress and his assurances that the FBI intended to follow its regular process in this and all personnel matters. On MTP Daily yesterday, that attorney, Mr. Goldman, added this.
I don't think that you can rationally reach any conclusion other than it was political. There's not a scintilla of evidence that any of Pete's political opinions affected his job. And in fact, you can read the IG report, who says that Pete was one of the more aggressive people on the Hillary Clinton email investigation. And if he had wanted to somehow impact the election, he could have easily done it and did not do it.
So, Michael Steele, the FBI has not made a statement about this yet exactly, but his attorney, you heard there, Mr. Goldman, said the Office of Professional Responsibility at the FBI recommended something different, which was a suspension and some kind of a punitive measure, but not a firing, and that the deputy director of the FBI stepped in and canned Peter Strzok.
Yeah, and I'm almost certain that that deputy director got some marching orders to do that, and to go outside what is the normal procedure and protocol for these matters. You know, is at least a yellow flag, if not a red flag, that there was an undercurrent here, something else that was driving this decision. You know, his lawyers, Strzok's lawyers, are going to pursue this very openly and very publicly. And again, here's the bottom line. It's one more attack, assault on the FBI and the institution as a whole. And on top of everything else that it has to deal with, you know, the one thing that it can hold on to, which is why it was so stressed in those hearings, is that we have a process, we have procedures that we try to do and that we do execute by the book. If it is shown that you've gone beyond that, it's another blow to the agency, and again, at the hand of the administration itself. So it's one of those things that, you know, the public's confidence in the FBI is already rattled because of the incessant, belligerent approaches taken by the administration. And if it's shown internally that there works to undermine its processes to get at the truth and to expose the truth, then that, again, is further undermining of the agency as a whole.
All right, we've got a ton more to get to this morning. We'll talk.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.